You can see the power curves hugging each other closer than a couple at a Coldplay concert. My legs aren't as legendary as I thought. This is Magene's new power meter set, the PES P515, which includes the P515 spider-based power meter and the PES cranks. It was released in May this year and Magene sent me this unit for review. In today's video, besides just reviewing its stats and accuracy, we'll also talk briefly about how a spider-based power meter stacks up against other types of power meters and why you may want to use a power meter in the first place. Of course, we'll also do a quick unboxing and cover some key setup steps so that you can hit the ground running. Well, that doesn't work. So that you can crank it before you tank it. Of course, if you're here just for the review, use the chapter markers below to jump right to it. If this is your first power meter purchase, I think it might be useful to set up some context by talking about the three most common options you have when it comes to power meters: spider, crank arm, and pedal-based systems. Spider-based meters like the P515 give you accurate total power, but the power balance between individual legs is an estimate. Single-sided crank arm and pedal-based meters will measure power only on one side and then double the figure. Accuracy could be bad in the case of a power imbalance between your legs. Dual-sided systems will give you accurate, independent readings from both legs. Spider-based systems cannot be easily swapped between bikes. Crank arms are easier, and pedals are obviously the easiest to swap. Spider-based systems also need the most careful planning around compatibility with your existing components, while power meter pedals will fit virtually any bike. On the flip side, with power meter pedals, you're typically tied into a specific cleat style. Advanced pedal-based systems give you more data like seated and standing position and pedal centering. In the event of a fall, however, these are the most susceptible to damage. Spider-based meters typically have the best battery life, followed by crank-based systems, with pedal-based meters having relatively poor battery life. Pedal and crank arm systems add the least weight. Spiders add between 50 and 100 grams more. On average, crank-based meters are the cheapest, followed by spider-based meters and then pedal-based systems. Of course, expect to pay more for dual-sided systems. Alright, let's come back to the PES P515 and talk through its key specs as I unbox it to save some time. In the box, you get a quick start guide and an info booklet. The P515 power meter uses the popular 4-bolt 110 BCD configuration that's probably compatible with your existing chainrings. Besides power, it also records cadence, pedaling balance, and smoothness. This power meter is made of 7075 aluminium and weighs only 99 grams. Charge via this magnetic USB charging cable for up to 330 hours of use. Now, if you bought QED chainrings with the set, you'll get these 4 chainring bolts. Next up, you get the PES cranks. These are 165mm and they have a 24mm steel spindle, which will make them compatible with most modern Shimano group sets. You get a lock ring and a lock ring conversion tool for installation, and the crank bolt, of course. Engineered with triple hollow channel design, these weigh 515 grams, but they are available in 5 sizes. Generally, short cranks are in short supply, at least in India, and being able to easily get this length with this set is a significant bonus. These QED chainrings are an optional purchase. As I said earlier, your existing chainrings will probably work too. I can't argue with how good they look and feel though. This is the 50-34 combo that weighs only 140 grams. While cheap at just $300, the P515's accuracy, metrics provided, battery life and weight match and in some cases even exceed a few of the most expensive spider-based systems out there. How good is it really? Let's find out. I'm not going to cover installation because it was something I had my bike shop do. You will need a torque wrench, other specialized tools, and you need technical know-how to make sure this doesn't happen to you. Magene has a detailed installation video, and the manual you get with the power meter has all the steps and specifications your mechanic will need. Here are the steps you need to take after the installation. Use the Magene utility app to activate your power meter. You get a firmware update. Now would be the time to take it. Perform the zero offset calibration. I also like enabling this setting that will zero offset by turning the crank back 5 turns. So you can do it anytime without having to start the app. Step on the pedals with a bit of force a few times and then use your head unit or the utility app to calibrate the device. Magene recommends calibrating the power meter at least once a month. Additionally, calibration is essential if you reinstall the power meter, if there is a significant external impact like a crash or collision, or if you notice a deviation in the power from your expected figures. Coming to your head unit, you only need to pair the power meter once as a power device. The power meter will provide cadence info too. You don't need to pair it as a cadence sensor as well. I added a page for power stats, and this is what it looks like. It's got average 3-second power. You want this 3-second average because instantaneous power will fluctuate way too much to be useful. I also like training by lap, so my average and max power are set up to show lap values. You'll find the pedaling, balance and smoothness stats very interesting. We'll talk about these stats in a bit. You probably already have cadence on another screen, and that about covers it for all the data points provided by the power meter. Check your specific head unit for additional derived stats it supports. Now for the meat and potatoes of this video, the review. I know you're all waiting to hear about the accuracy, so let's just dive into that first. To test accuracy, I carried out 2 tests. The first is hooking my bike up to a trainer. The second is doing a hill climbing test outdoors. For the trainer test, I used the Magene P515 and did a few short structured workouts. You'll see data from a relatively short 13-minute ride because I did a few test rides before this to warm up the trainer, and it took me a while to get everything set up. Firmware updates on the trainer, configuring it correctly, pairing multiple head units, additional sensors. Cut me some slack, I'm not GP Llama. So what I'm looking for in this test is how well the average power matches, whether the power meter reacts well to sudden sprints and higher power output, and whether there are large deviations in the power reported or complete drop-offs from the power meter. You can see the power curves hugging each other closer than a couple at a Coldplay concert. And unlike Andy and Kristen, these don't separate. The average power reported by the power meter was 146 watts and the trainer is under 5% less at 139. This difference is somewhat expected because the trainer is measuring power after drivetrain losses, and unfortunately I can't say my chain was well lubed before the test. If we zoom into the first sprint, you can see the averages even better matched here and how well the power curves follow each other. I remember dropping gears at the end of this sprint. That drop was picked up here by the power meter but smoothed over by the trainer. If we zoom into this section, you'll see the power meter data is a bit more twitchy. That's because it's got a higher sampling frequency and the trainer tends to smooth things out. I can add some smoothing to the power meter data. See how much better they look together. The difference in values is due to drivetrain losses and the fact that these devices are measuring power using fundamentally different technologies. Ideally, an accuracy test should have been carried out with power pedals, but I don't have a pair. I don't have a trainer either, and I have to thank the bike store in Pune for allowing me to come in and run this test on theirs. If we take a step back and take a look at the cadence, you can see the curves matching beautifully. The average isn't displayed on the screen here, but both the power meter and an external sensor report a 60 RPM average. So this ticks all the boxes I was looking for. Let's move on to the outdoor hill climbing test. On my ride, I rode up my favorite climb. You can see the segment stats on screen, and the power recorded by my power meter for the segment was 147 watts. My system weight, that's my weight, and the bike weight with all accessories, bottle, helmet, shoes, etc. was a bit over 113 kilos. If we feed this data into one of my favorite calculators and put my actual speed into 5.7 kilometers per hour, it says I'd need to ride at 148 watts. Of course, there are a lot of other variables here that we don't have actual values for, but I'm amazed at how close that is to the recorded power of 147 watts. More generally, on my long rides outdoors, I experience consistent power output without any drifting or drop-offs in the data and no offsetting after sudden sprints. Given this experience and these experiments, the P515 easily passes the power accuracy and cadence tests. To test pedaling balance, I tried pedaling only with one side at a time, and I could see that reflected immediately. The power meter would show 0% for one leg and 100% for the other. Now, I don't believe looking at the instantaneous value of this metric is very useful. I don't think it's possible to be 50-50 all the time. However, if you look at the average at the end of your rides, that will be key info. I always thought my left leg was doing more work, but turns out it's the opposite. On my long rides, my left leg is doing only 48% of the work. Pedaling smoothness is a percentage which indicates how evenly power is applied across a full revolution of a pedal stroke. Don't expect to get 100% here, only a motor can do that. You'd probably see values around 20 or 30%. I'll link to videos that talk about how you can use these stats to improve your cycling performance. There's not much temperature variance here for me to be able to test the temperature conditioning, and as far as the IPX7 rating, well, I rode in the rain and it kept working. Does the battery last 330 hours? You'll have to come back to this channel next year and hopefully I'll be able to tell you. Overall, I'm really pleased with how this power meter set performs, and we can now move on to my final thoughts on whether or not you should buy it. You've heard me drone on for so long, give me just one more minute to set up some context. In general, a power meter is arguably the best way to measure your progress and use that information to seriously train and improve to become a better cyclist. If you want to compare yourself with another cyclist, perhaps even a pro, or maybe just with yourself on prior rides, you can't use speed as that's affected by weight, cycle, tire size, route, wind, traffic, etc. But you can use power output to compare your relative performance and capabilities. I'll make a video about this later, but for now, I'll say just this. Getting a power meter after 8 years of cycling has given me a somewhat rude wake-up call regarding my cycling chops. My legs aren't as legendary as I thought. If you're seriously interested in training, make sure you've already spent a bit of time training with a cadence sensor and a heart rate monitor. When you're ready to take it to the next level, it's time for the power meter. So, how do we decide between a spider, crank arm and pedal-based system? As long as you get dual pedal or crank arm based systems, you can get the same accuracy across all power meter types. Just remember that dual-sided systems will cost significantly more. A pedal-based system makes sense if you want advanced pedaling dynamics data that other power meters don't provide, if you want the exact power contributed by individual legs, if your crankset is not compatible with other power meters, or if you want to easily swap your power pedals between bikes. Now, if you're just interested in the exact power, you could also look at a dual crank arm based system. There's a wide range of power cranks available, and compared to spiders, it's easier to swap them between bikes. Normally, single-sided power cranks are the cheapest tech you could use to get power data. But with the P515 on the scene, you now have a more affordable option where you don't have to sacrifice accuracy. A spider-based system typically has the best battery life, it's the most protected in the case of a crash, and it measures accurate total power. When you can use the pedaling balance stat to fix imbalances between your legs, I personally don't see the usefulness of absolute power values from each leg. Spiders might add about 50 to 100 grams more than power pedals or crank arms, and if that's significant to you, you can offset that to some extent with lighter chainrings and crank arms. Spiders like the Power2Max NG have variants for a huge range of drivetrains, but if your bike is compatible with the PES P515, and there's a good chance it is, it will give you the same data and accuracy at a fraction of the cost. And that cost is $300 in the US and just under 33,000 rupees in India. In the description, I'll add some links to stores stocking it. If a spider-based meter checks your boxes, I don't see a reason why even seasoned riders wouldn't be happy with the P515. And if you're buying your first power meter, you can't go wrong with this set. Now go watch this video on some unique cycling mistakes, and until next time, ride safe.